Well, hi there everybody, and welcome to this short presentation on the Systems Approach to Training, or SAT as it's commonly known in the training world. And this presentation is designed to give you an overview of how the SAT works, on what it's all about, so you can actually apply it into your training processes or systems at work. It's a cyclic process, and I'll explain to you the detail of each process on what it's involved. To accompany this, you should have a handout in front of you. If you haven't got a handout, then you may want to stop and pick up the handout that you should have. Anybody has any questions about anything at all, obviously I can't talk to you because of this recording, but drop me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So let's have a look at the first process then. The first process is where we need to identify needs and also do some planning, and this takes time. It's not something that you can do in an afternoon. It takes quite a long period of time, and this is one of the processes where managers can get quite frustrated with how long it takes. Now, it takes as long or how long as a piece of string. It depends on exactly what it is that you're looking at and how you're going to plan the training. But there's two real core areas that we should be looking at here. We should be looking at individual needs, and we should look at organizational needs. And like any needs, we need to do some diagnosis, we need to do some research. So for an individual, for example, it may look at individual analysis that's been identified, say for example at a development review or at an appraisal stage. What we look at where the person is now, and then we look at where we want them to be in the future, and that gap is what's called the skills gap. And if we've done this correctly, this is also called the training needs analysis, or TNA, as you'll hear people talk about. And what we're looking at here, we're looking at all sorts of different things. We could be looking at where the individual wants to be. We could be looking at where we want the individual wants to be. And we could also be looking at succession planning. Succession planning is really, really important. I work with organisations sometimes, and there's no succession planning at all. It ends up being a panic because someone's leaving. For example, a manager may leave, and it becomes a big panic, because then we start thinking, who can we do? It was only Sue could do that job, and now she's left. Well, that's not particularly very good. If we do succession planning correctly at times like this, then we may identify exactly where someone needs to be in the future, and therefore we can identify their particular training needs. The other area is looking at organizational needs, and of course this may be your own individual organization ways to be in the future. It could also incorporate some succession planning in there as well. We may need to decide that in the future we need a group of people that can be trained in this particular area, but there may also be legal requirements, when maybe we have to go down a particular area because it's going to involve an impact on the needs of the sector. Now, there are certain organisations out there that can help you look at this. Each sector has its own what's called Sector Skills Council, or SSC, and they produce documentation every year that helps you identify the skills for your particular sector. So, for example, if I'm in the learning development field, and my sector skills council is called Lifelong Learning UK. So I know if I go to the Lifelong Learning UK website, there's going to be some form of identification of needs that we need in our particular sector. There are 25 sector skills councils in the UK, and if you don't know what yours is, then go on to Google and type in Sector Skills Council for then whatever particular sector that you're in, and it'll help you out there. Again, if anybody has any problems, just drop me an email and I'll be able to help you. Sector skills councils are really important because sector skills councils produce what's called the NOS, or National Occupational Skills, that ultimately become qualifications in our particular sector. So they're very, very useful people to know about. Some sector skills councils are more effective than others. Some aren't particularly effective at all, but you can maybe sort of give them a bit of a prod and ask them certain questions. It's their job to help you in your particular sector. Okay. The next stage of this process is the designing phase. The designing phase will incorporate all the essential information that you're going to need with regards to the delivery of the training, and would include things such as lesson plans, which you should have a copy of in the handout, various handouts, various PowerPoint slides, various activities that you may use as part and parcel of the training. It may also include a training syllabus. What do we mean by a training syllabus? Well, a training syllabus is an overarching document that you would use certainly if you wanted to get any of your training accredited. Organisations such as the Institute of Leadership and Management, ILM, would want to see some form of training syllabus before they rubber stamp or endorse your particular training course or session. And what this is it's an overarching documentation which would include things such as aim, objectives, and actual learning outcomes. Now, the thing about designing training is that it never stops. You're constantly producing and updating and trying to improve your training. Well, at least I hope you are. And this process is very much very cyclic. It doesn't stop. It's not a one-stop thing. But you've got to start somewhere, and this is where we start with regarding to our designing process. Okay, part 3 is the actual facilitation aspects. This is the actual delivery of the training, and using a lot of the techniques and the skills that we've already discussed as part of the PTT or Advanced PTT course. Part 4 of this process is the assessing element. We've got to make sure, we need to make sure training is working, and if it's not working, then we need to obviously go back to the designing board. It could be what we're trying to get across, it could be the way that we're delivering it. So this element is really, really important, and there needs to be some form of assessment that takes place during the training process, and it may take the form of several different ways. First of all, trainers may do some own evaluation. They may do some observations of what they feel is going on. They may also do some hard concrete observations. For example, when you were on the PTT trainer course, I was observing you and assessing, making sure that learning was taking place. Secondly, there should always be questioning. There should always be questioning, and this could be the ad hoc questions that the trainer is using throughout the training process, or there may be some sort of formal points, such as a formal summary at the end of each session, where there's some formal questions that a section of the group are asked to check their understanding. Or there may be a formal recap session if, for example, you're using a longer course, you're delivering on a longer course. For example, on the PTT course, which is 2 days, remember, what did I get you to do the second day, the second day of the course? You were standing up and delivering training using the skills that you'd learnt the day before. So there was a formal questioning process there as well as an evaluation going on there as well at the same time. And the final one is testing, and I'm going to be really honest with you now. If you're ever involved in government funding, they will require that you have some form of test, but it doesn't have to be a test as you and I know a test. It could be some of the other things that we spoke about earlier on, i.e. trainer evaluation or questioning. But when people see test, they automatically assume that it's 20 questions, and or we go down the road of having multiple choice type questions. And I don't know about you, but although there is a purpose and a place for those sort of type tests, quite often it's not really what we're sort of looking for. And to be honest with you, a lot of training companies use it because it's easy to be able to record, which is great. But think about the people, because some people may not particularly like to be tested like that. And if you're constantly using tests in that fashion, it can certainly put people off sometimes attending training in the future. So although testing is an option, bear in mind that it does have its uses, and it may not be appropriate for everybody that's concerned. Part 5 of the systems approach to training is looking at the actual evaluation process. Now, we must evaluate our training correctly. If we don't evaluate our training, then how are we going to know if we're doing a really good job? And so we must follow some key processes when we're evaluating our training. So the first stage of how we evaluate training is people's reactions to training. This is very important, and I'm sure we've all had opportunities where we filled out one of these forms, because it normally comes in the form of like a happy sheet that you get at the end of the training session or training day. And of course that itself can be a bit of a problem, because most people aren't really that keen on thinking about what they did in their training at the end of the session. People will be thinking about all sorts of different things, and maybe real constructive points to complete on the form may not be the ideal time. So I'd always think about giving the evaluation sheet, the people's reactions to training, out well before the end, because people just won't complete it. Also, make sure that it's as simple and easy as possible to complete, because if you make it complicated, people just won't fill it in. So, but very important, people's reactions to training. The second phase of how we evaluate training is people's learning experience, and did people learn? On some courses, of course, like the professional training techniques and advanced professional training techniques, is very easy to assess. On others, we may have to go back to looking at trainer evaluations, and also possibly some questioning or some testing, but bear in mind what we said previously with regards to that. Now, the first two elements of evaluation were obviously conducted either when training's taking place or very, very quickly afterwards. The next stages are conducted after training's taken place. And I'm going to be really honest with you now, a lot of training organisations, a lot of training companies do not do this correctly. It's really important that we do this correctly, because if we don't, then we miss out on either developing our training further, but also from a business perspective, from missing out on opportunities to develop our business further. And what we look at in this instance, first of all, is the behaviour. Has behaviour changed? Because, like everything, if we don't change behaviour, then there's very little point in doing any training in the first place. So we need to check this, and we can't check this whilst training is taking place. It has to be conducted at a later stage, and I would say realistically you're probably looking at 3 months down the road. And how do you do this? Well, what we do is we will select people, and we will invite them to take part in a questionnaire, and we're looking for changes in behaviour. We're looking for how what you're doing now is different from when you were doing it before you did the course. And if we ask really powerful questions like that, then we can start to gauge, did any behaviour change? We can also maybe speak to other people. If we're involved in delivering training for an organisation, for example, we may decide to speak to someone in management to find out, hey, is this person doing anything differently now they've completed the training? From a business perspective, of course, this can be very, very beneficial. And if you're ever working with organisations, say with an organisation asks you to develop and design and deliver a training course in-house, or a bespoke type training, it's really useful to do, because you go back later on and you ask them, has there been any behaviour change? But also you're putting yourself in people's eye again. So I've won many more business from using this process effectively, and when used effectively, it's very good. And also sometimes you get people telling you, actually I think that you should have included this, or you should have included that, which is also great as well, because then what you do, you go back and have a trial and put that in, and it's obviously going to improve your training. But behavioural measurement, change of behaviour, is really important when we're evaluating training. The final piece of how we evaluate training is based on results. Again, like behaviour, we can't measure this whilst training is taking place, so it has to be after the training is taking place, when the individual is back in the workplace. Now, results are really important, but some people get quite het up about this because they can't understand how they can measure results. Obviously, if you were all salespeople and you do a training course, it's very easy to measure results because the sales figures will go up. But sometimes we may have to look at other ways of doing this form of measurement. And we need to sometimes think out of the box sometimes. And I'll give you an example. Once I was working with some health and social care staff, and they couldn't understand how they could actually measure results. But one of the things that we discovered was that they are inspected. They're inspected every so often, and so we use the inspection grades to use as a form of measurement. And you have to think like this. You can't just think, well, we don't do any results. You will do, and it maybe just be a way of thinking things through. So there you have it. There you have it with regards to evaluation. We're going to make sure that we do reactions. We make sure that we do some learning. Did learning take place? They're all undertaken whilst the training really is taking place, or very close to the end of the training. And the final two, but behaviour and results, are all undertaken after training's actually taken place, probably 3 months plus time. So there you have the full set of processes that we follow with regards to the system approach to training. And like all cycles, it never ends, because as soon as you've finished evaluating, you've got your data there for your evaluation, and you start looking at, is it meeting the needs? You start redesigning, you start changing how you're going to do the facilitation aspects, how you're going to assess it, and again how you're going to evaluate it. So it never ends, and good training never ends really. It always gets constantly looked at. Well, that's about it for this little session on the systems approach to training. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've learnt something from this process. Obviously, it's all very difficult when we're doing little sessions like this, because we don't get any sort of audience interaction and feedback. But I hope you've enjoyed it, and if there's anything I can help you with in the future, please don't hesitate to let me know. Okay, thank you very much, and stay fantastic. Bye bye.